name is Heather Gallagher. One of my jobs in this evening is to read the biographies and mispronounce many of the names. So for that, I apologize for right now. Do you want me to just jump in and read the bios?
Well, I would love to set up for our panelists and for everyone. This is our third episode of Ask an Expert through NEMPAC. NEMPAC is an acronym for the North End Music and Performing Arts Center. And if you're friends with me on Facebook, then you see me post about it 5 times a day because this is our opera season, the month of June. And it's so exciting to have 3 guests today that I've had the pleasure of working with in different capacities in the world of opera, but also just all separate from NEMPAC. So it's really exciting to have the 3 of you here. I know, Fran, that you and I have done work at NEMPAC together, but we've also been members of Opera on Tap and all that fun stuff together. So without further ado, Heather, if you could introduce our panelists.
Yeah, definitely. 3 different people, wonderful people from 3 different, nearly completely walks of life, which is fantastic. The first person we have is actually somebody that I don't know, Brooke Stanton, and she is a professional costumer who has worked in theater, film, and television. Her clients include George Lucas, Disney, Peter Sellers, the Commonwealth Shakespeare Company, New England Conservatory, and the American Conservatory Theater, among others. She has toured the US and Europe with shows and held every position in the costuming field from designer to stitcher. She studied costume design at New York University and has a degree in textiles from the California College of the Arts. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, Brooke. We also have Fran Rogers. Tenor Fran Rogers' recent opera credits include Puck in the world premiere of Scott Wheeler's Midsummer, Don José in The Tragedy of Carmen, Venditore Ambulante in Puccini's La Bohème, concert performance with the Boston Symphony Orchestra at Tanglewood, Rodolfo in Puccini's La Bohème, Art in Solito's Triangle, which was world premiere, Dos Señores in I Am Easily Assimilated from Bernstein's Candide, which was a concert performance with Federico von Stade and the Boston Symphony Orchestra, Ruggiero in Puccini's La Rondine, Gonsini in Sousa's The Dangerous Liaisons, and Ramiro in Rossini's La Cenerentola. Fran recently made his Boston Symphony Hall solo debut, performing a collection of songs by Pavel Haas and Gideon Klein. He is a regular national anthem soloist for Boston sports teams, including the Celtics, Red Sox, and Patriots, having performed on multiple occasions for live audiences of up to 70,000 people and international television audiences of up to 14 million. He has been critically acclaimed for his luscious tenor voice that stole the show every time he opened his mouth, open, free, and effortless high notes, his athleticism and raw strength and natural timbre. Fran studies under soprano Deborah Voigt and baritone Mark Oswald. It is so wonderful to have you with us tonight, Fran. Lina González-Granados, she is praised for her attention to orchestral colors by Opera Wire and her ability to create lightning changes in tempo, meter, and effect from the Boston Musical Intelligence. Lina González-Granados has firmly established herself locally and abroad as a talented conductor of opera and symphonic repertoire, including contemporary music. Winner of the 4th Chicago Symphony Orchestra Sir Georg Solti International Conducting Competition, Lina González-Granados will become the new Solti conducting apprentice under the guidance of Maestro Riccardo Muti, starting in February 2020 and continuing through June 2021. This fall, 2019, she started her new appointments as conducting fellow of the Philadelphia Orchestra and Seattle Symphony, and within 2017 to 19, Lina also served as the Taki Concordia Fellow, a position created by Maestro Marin Alsop to foster entrepreneurship and talent of female conductors. Recent guest appearances have included the Tulsa Opera, as well as the Orquesta Sinfónica Nacional de Colombia and Filarmónica de Medellín. She has been the assistant conductor for the Chicago Symphony at the Ravenna Festival, London Philharmonic, Carnegie Hall's National Youth Orchestra of the United States, Orchestra of the Americas, and has worked as cover conductor of the Nashville Symphony, working with artists such as Yefim Bronfman, Pinchas Zuckerman, and Giancarlo Guerriero. This season, she will be working as cover conductor for Zubin Mehta at the LA Philharmonic, Yannick Nézet-Séguin, and Thomas Belchard, among other artists. This current 19 to 20 season will include guest appearances with the Philadelphia Orchestra, Seattle Symphony, San Diego Symphony, Stanford Symphony, San Francisco Conservatory Orchestra, and the Orquesta Sinfónica del Principado de Asturias. González-Granados was named one of the contestants selected for La Maestra competition, which will take place at the Paris Philharmonic in March 2020. She has attended the 2019 Tanglewood Conducting Seminar, as well as the Lucerne Festival Masterclass with Maestro Bernard Heidnik and the Cabrillo Festival of Contemporary Music with Maren Alsop and James Ross. She also participated in the Linda and Mitch Hart Institute for Conductors at the Dallas Opera with Maestro Carlo Montañero and Nicole Pemont, making her the first Hispanic conductor selected for that role. Lina is a staunch proponent of the music of Latin American composers, work that earned her recognition as one of the Latinas under 30 by El Mundo newspaper in 2016. In 2014, she founded the Unitas Ensemble, a Boston-based chamber ensemble specializing in Latin American music. Her work with the Unitas Ensemble has yielded multiple world, North American, and American premieres, as well as the creation and release of the Unitas Ensemble album, Estaciones, recorded alongside the Latin Grammy-winning Quarteto Latinoamericano. Born and raised in Cali, Colombia, Lina made her conducting debut in 2008 with the Youth Orchestra of Bellas Artes in Cali. She earned her master's degree in conducting and a graduate diploma in choral conducting from New England Conservatory, and graduated as a Doctor of Musical Arts in Orchestral Conducting at Boston University. Her principal mentors included Maren Alsop, Bernard Haitink, Bramwell Tovey, Benjamin Juarez, and Charles Peltz. And she also was the conductor for a wonderful production of Der Vampire that I and Alex was involved in a number of years ago. So we are so happy to have Lina González-Granados with us this evening. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, girls. Thank you.
Welcome.
So nice to see you.
It's so wonderful to see you. Lina, we're gonna kick off getting to know each of you a little bit better with you. As Heather mentioned, Lina came into our lives in a very non-conforming opera production that Opera Hub did a few years ago. And it was a reimagining and a retranslation of the work Der Vampire by Marschner. And as you can imagine, if you had to play an actual vampire in the opera, you had to wear fangs. And both Heather and I had to learn how to sing with fangs. And Lina was nothing if not understanding that when we finally got to sing in them, that it was a little bit tough at first. So thank you for your grace with that with us. It was a learning curve for all of us, but it was one of the most fun times I've ever had on stage.
Yeah.
That being said, Lina, I believe congratulations are in order. You have just begun with a colleague, the Conductors Collective. And this has begun, I'm assuming, in the time of COVID and out of necessity from having our industry around us just have to evolve and change in response to the pandemic. Would you be able to speak a little further on what the Conductors Collective does and what brought about this need for you?
Well, first of all, thank you. I don't think I was anything but not understanding with the diction with those fangs. And I know that you guys just learned to like me as I am what I say, an acquired taste. So I still love that you guys, you ladies love me. And the Conductors Collective is the brainchild of a good friend, my best friend, Kensho Watanabe, who's actually here, and myself. We were both associated, or we are both associated in some way, shape, or form with the Philadelphia Orchestra, and that's where we met. And the first time we met, I think it's September, it was like an absolute click as colleagues. We just started seeing that we could support each other, which is not as easy when you are so lonely traveling and like discovering all these work-related cultures in different orchestras that are so different. And we realize a really like young stage of our conversations at that time that there's so many things that you don't get to learn while you're in the school, like especially now that I graduated and I spent like my entire like adult life in the school. Then you go and it's like baptism by fire in a lot of things, as emotional intelligence, like real true paramounts of leadership, being empathic. For example, being empathic with the fangs and the diction, and not like all of these things about reading the room that they really don't teach you because you're so worried about perfection and about an excellent that sometimes is not even real. It's just like images that we have but that are not as coherent with the human spirit. So based on these values of empathy and emotional intelligence, and based on the music spirit, we decided in March, when everything shut down, that we wanted to give back to the community, because we're in a place of privilege with our connections and our friends and our network. So we were the first one starting this series of webinars, like right in March, like March 15, something like that was our first approach. And we started bringing all of our friends, so Yannick, Marin, our mentors, to talk about mentorship and how do we value this, because we don't want conductors at school, especially those who have been robbed at this moment of the ability to make sound in school. I mean, it's so difficult to study conducting because you depend of other people to actually do like your instrument. But now that you're not like at school like that, I think if I feel at loss, like the loss of music and music making, then we said, we need to give back to the community. So we started this series of free webinars, and we didn't even understand the reach that we were going to have. So we have audiences of more than 38 countries, and they're free. People that can come from, for example, our webinars are at 3 p.m. on Wednesdays, and there's people that come from Australia, and there's like 3 a.m. there, and they wake up to talk to Yannick, to talk to Marin, and actually have a safe space that they can ask anything. Everything is fair game related to the topic. And with that also for free, because I mean, we are affiliated to so many organizations, and they charge us, and they don't give us anything to the young conductors to actually like advance and care for each other and love each other and just be together. So it was a unique opportunity to just create a community that is a little more less psycho, I want to say. That's how it all started.
That's so beautiful. I mean, I've been following over the last month and change just the rapid growth of your collective, and if you check out the Facebook page for Conductors Collective, they are upwards of 700 plus members. And I just think that Lina, even when you casually mention Yannick, for those in our audience that might not know exactly how impressive it is for anyone around the world to be able to have FaceTime with conductors that lead the Philadelphia Orchestra, that conducted the Met. This is a huge opportunity to get what you just spoke so eloquently about. And I think it's true in almost every performance medium that the idea of structure and schooling is so focused on perfection and not on individual, and not on also nurturing the artist inside the individual. There's all this external wish to please instead of why did you get into this in the first place? And I just think that during a time where it's so hard to feel like part of a community from afar, what a wonderful thing. What a wonderful thing that the two of you have begun for the music world itself, and for conductors at different stages in their career.
And it's open for everyone who can come and wants to have a conversation. We don't focus it just in conductor conversations. It's not score study. It's not how to move the baton, what kind of baton, because there's tons of that. already in the world. Like we really don't need how many buttons and how many sizes of buttons. That's just shallow. But just having like a real conversation with someone and say, hey, you know, sometimes I get scared. What do you do with dealing with nerves? That's universal. You know, how do you deal with in a rehearsal with someone that is actually having difficulty to connect with you and your style of leadership? That is universal for everyone who wants to shake the world. And I think we just entered this absolutely ridiculous stage of the mind where we cannot make music, we cannot see each other, and in March, and then, you know, the ability to change instantly, it's something that people is like, okay, what do I need to do? And that's something that I think we were able to do, and we haven't, I mean, since March we haven't stopped. I think we're gonna take 1 week break, but we already like about to announce season 3, and you know, we have CEOs, we have every single part of the orchestra that you want to get to know, and opera conductors and everything. It's just magical. And also it's the only time that you can do that, because everybody's at home. It's not that everybody's traveling. It's different to get that kind of mentorship, even for example with someone as I have the big privilege to have a couple of those of my mentors, of Bramwell, Marin, just like at the speed of, like, I don't know, a message, you know, like a text message. I'm like, hey, how do I do this? How do I do this bar? And they respond. Not everybody has that ability. So the fact that we now can get together and just receive a free mentorship wherever you are in the world, you know, it's just priceless.
That's awesome. I put the link to the Conductors Collective for anyone in attendance who is curious of checking out more of their work and joining on Wednesdays at 3 p.m. Thank you so much, Lina, for speaking to us about that. A little bit later, I'll follow up with a couple of congratulations and questions about what's in store for Unitas Ensemble for this next season. So next we're going to get to know Brooke Stanton just a little bit. Hi, Brooke. It's so wonderful to get to see you in, I think, like just non-backstage conditions where you're being asked to create an entire visual array of costumes and put us into a different year. My first experience with Brooke was working together at the opera company here in Boston, Odyssey Opera. And I knew I adored her because we had to be dressed as like medieval peasants. And I was getting fitted in what some might think was a relatively burlappy style dress, very oversized for what I normally wear. And she told me, you get to be a rich peasant because you get to have one button on your dress. And I was like, I like her. I like the way she does research. So Brooke, just to speak to a little bit more of your bio, if you get to know Brooke, you find out little tidbits along the way that you're like, how are you even one person? You worked with George Lucas on some of the Star Wars films, correct?
Yeah, I worked for Mr. Lucas for 5 years. I was a creature construction specialist. This is, so I sewed myself out of a job, basically. I helped to design and build motion capture suits. So now the creatures are all digital and they're not handmade anymore. So it was amazing working there for him because, you know, growing up as a kid watching Star Wars, that was one of my main inspirations for like, I want to do that. I want to make those. And then to get to like build Ewoks was just amazing. And great to work on the set too, which was just a dream come true. So I worked on the special edition trilogy of Star Wars, Return of the Jedi, Empire Strikes Back, and then my last project with him was, sadly, making Jar Jar Binks for Phantom Menace. I apologize.
So now we know where to send our targeted fan mail, just so everyone knows. If you were anti or for Team Jar Jar, we have Brooke right here. So.
I have to say, I was not the designer. It's
now,
just the technician.
Now, the other part that I feel like I didn't know until recently was that you are also a descendant of Elizabeth Cady Stanton, which makes sense when you see Brooke's name spelled out and you're like, oh, Stanton, that makes sense. If you look at a side-by-side picture though, I think that like not only did you get the spirit of one of our nation's original suffragists, she was also an abolitionist, and she was at the forefront of the women's rights movement much earlier than we imagine, like the Mary Poppins era of votes for women, even though that's England. And just seeing a picture of you two finally side by side, I was like, oh my gosh, I think that you just took her cheekbones and eyes. Wow. Is there any form of just amazing joy or pressure coming from that kind of lineage? I know that we're in the 100th year celebrating the ratification of the right for women to vote, and we've seen a lot of concerts have to sadly cancel this year that were in commemoration of that. So there's a lot of feelings for me put into it, but for you, how does that feel?
Well, I was very honored to be asked to do a video promo for Votes from Abroad for American expats to do their write-in, balloting, because we need to change. The government as it exists is not functioning. When Médecins Sans Frontières gets called into your country to help, that's when you know you're living in a failed democracy. So I was very honored, but I did mention to them that even though it's the 100th year for white women to vote, women of color were, it was the 60s.
It was
before
the 60s,
yeah, 1962. And even now, what they're doing right now, Mitch McConnell shutting down all the polling stations in the Black community, is the same thing. It's just voter barring, like the Jim Crow laws, barring people from voting, disenfranchising people across the country. Yeah. So, but growing up, did I know? No, not until I was like, I had to do a research project, and I'm like, what now?
Everyone else is like spitting into the tube, hoping that they're related to somebody cool. You get to write the paper and be like, oh wow, okay, we've got a lot of material here.
And also Abraham Lincoln's Secretary of War, Secretary Stanton, who convinced him, hey, Abe, I know you really don't want to go to war, but this Civil War thing, really, really important. I think we need to actually send Northern troops down to the South because they're not going to stop until we make them stop. So, yeah. So he was that dude.
This is mind-blowing, bro.
He was the only one. So the first impeachment proceedings against President Johnson was because he fired Mr. Stanton for saying, President Johnson, you can't do that. That's actually against the Constitution. He's like, no, you're fired. He's like, no, actually, I'm not. You're impeached.
Actually, you're impeached.
Yeah. So
wow.
I think speaking truth to power is a quality that we all should foster. But jumping on to what Lina said about, being empathetic and fostering communication, the two most important things that I learned in undergrad at NYU studying costume design was they made you take all of the courses so that you could empathize with the director, with the sound guy, with the lighting guy, and with the actor, and with the playwright. So not just, if you're stuck on a desert island by yourself, like in the pandemic, you could make your own show, but also so that, it's a collaborative art, when we get together, you have to, as Lina knows, as she was a performer, I outfitted her as well backstage. That was fun. That she knows, it's going to be harder to sing with vampire teeth, and that's going to affect your diction. And I empathize with you that that's going to be a struggle, Meanwhile, I'm like, no, really, you should wear the hat. Every tenor, I'm sorry, Fran, but like tenors wearing hats is the bane of my existence. But to empathize with all of our collaborators, I can't tell you how many friends of mine are individual artists, visual artists, And I envy them right now because they can go into their studios and get out their materials and paint and express and channel all the emotion into their work of art. And we are stuck not being able to do that. I mean, as many Zoom performances as I've watched and participated in, it's not the same.
No.
You know, and there's no safe way that we can be together until there's a vaccine. And so I'm now officially an artist in this residence for a year. So it's going to be a long time before we're allowed to do what we love to do, what we long to do again.
You gave a perfect chance for us to segue into seeing not only what your work looks like on stage, and I'm going to go into share screen for our panelists and guests just to see a couple of highlighted images from Brooke's website. Also, heads up, if you Google Brooke Stanton, there is another Brooke Stanton. She writes racy novels. This is not that Brooke Stanton. This is Brooke Stanton costume design. So if I will put the URL in our chat box after we take a peek at your work. But then I'd love for afterwards of us seeing your images, for you to tell us how this skill set is now being pivoted into your masks and the construction that you have crafted yourself to help safe outdoor singing. So before that, going into our shared screen, and thankfully the Wi-Fi is being my friend right now. So if you can just walk us through a couple of these images, Brooke, and right off the bat, like, you know, I know my theater world well enough that I'm assuming this is Angels in America.
Yes, it is.
And how did you construct these wings?
So that was in San Francisco. With ACT. I get them confused because ACT and ART here in Boston. But this was designed by the amazing Catherine Zuber, Tony Award-winning costume designer. I was head of wardrobe, and those are fully articulated wings based on like an erector set construction. So it's all metal with gears. You can see right at the bottom of her corset, there's two rings right there.
Oh, I think we can see right there.
Yep, that she can pull down, and the wings go down and they also fold back.
Just amazing.
She was hung with two pick points at her hips, so I constructed a whole rigging of a trapeze corset underneath, so she could do somersaults in the air as she entered. It was spectacular.
That's amazing. That's incredible. Now, for Boston opera fans, the two in this photo from The Importance of Being Earnest at Odyssey Opera, which Lina, you were also assistant conductor on, I believe.
Yes, I love that show.
It's hard to recognize Rochelle Schmiga without her signature pixie, you know, ultra blonde cut, but this is Rochelle Schmiga, and this is Neil Ferreira, for those of us who have worked with them several times. And Brooke, was this design a period of time that you've done before? Is this a favorite time period? I'd love to hear your research on it.
Yes, I love Oscar Wilde, both as a human being fighting for gay rights in an early time. He was imprisoned for having a younger male lover. And so I love this time period. The corset, in every time period, whether there's a corset, it's a good time period for me. Also, I love making hats. So making all the hats for the show was great fun. And just getting to work with all you fabulous people. That's the part I think I miss the most. I mean, I love making artwork that tells the story of your character before you even open your mouth on stage. But just getting to be backstage with you and goof around in fittings, I miss it. I miss it a lot.
I miss that a lot too. And I also miss the cast parties, closing a show and getting to actually celebrate everything that everyone collaborated on together. It's a moment of joy that you can't reproduce online. So Brooke, with your love of creating corsets,
yes,
let's hear a little bit about these masks that you've created. And good company that we can order them from.
Great segue. All right, so on one of the films that I worked on, What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams, I was asked to make medieval skull caps to represent the suffering people in hell. And so I took that pattern that I still have because I'm very organized and everything is labeled, and basically scaled it down to make a bra for the face, which is a domed singer's mask. So it doesn't have a ridge that goes right down the nose. The ribs of corsetry are on the eye socket or cheekbone, zygomatic arch. And it only touches your face at the bridge of the nose and then wraps back around to cover any particulates that are coming out of your mouth, because we know you opera singers are super spreaders. Their ability to project particulates 16 feet they measured. So, and also from deep within your lungs. So good job, good, well trained, but
we're exceptional.
Yes.
And for anyone interested in seeing closer pictures of those, I've included the link in our chat box as well. So Brooke, did anyone reach out to you about this, or were you thinking, I miss my singer friends, I want to help them sing in public so we can hang out? Where did the innovation for this come from?
Yes, I just miss you all so much. Also, at the same time, I was thinking, okay, so you can't, when you breathe in deeply, as opera singers do, the material from the mask sucks into your face. So you need a corsetry structure to hold it away from your face. Plus, you open your jaw so far down that you need nothing to go underneath your chin. So you got this little scarf thing here. I love it. So
brilliant.
Gray, one of your fabulous singers, said, I love it. It's a mask. It's an ascot. It's a mascot. So
that's so great.
Yeah.
For those of you who watched our pop-up opera of the Barber of Seville, Grey Leaper was our Figaro. And yes, when he got to sing in this mask, I immediately received text updates from him about how much fun he had wearing it, how freeing it was to sing in public and not have that fear that potentially he was doing someone else any harm or exposed himself. I'm going to go into shared screen, Brooke, one more time, just so that we can see a little bit of a close-up of Kay wearing her mask.
Yep.
Kay Patterson, the lovely soprano.
So you see the corset boning directly underneath her eye that goes down to the mid-neck corset boning that goes horizontally across to hold it away from your chin.
Wow.
And then the scarf that ties back behind so those particulates don't go out into the world.
That's incredible. That's incredible. I know that I need to put in an order of those. So if anyone is interested in checking those out, I know we have several singers watching our talk today. The link is right in the chat box. Thank you so much, Brooke, for telling us about your new endeavor. And we're gonna pivot over to Fran to hear about what the pandemic inspired him to do. And then all of us are going to talk about what it's like being an independent contractor and what do we do from here. So Fran, welcome.
Oh, thank you.
Fran let me know the other day that his absolute first role in an opera was with NEMPAC Opera. I had no idea, Fran.
Yes.
If I'd known, I probably would have hazed you a little bit more in terms of like resting my then 7-month pregnant belly on you like I did to Jun Han. He was a good sport. I would always just kind of stick Javi in my person on him just to see if I could make him laugh, and he never would because he's such a professional.
I probably would have.
That's always my goal, is to try and make other people break, which I think is maybe a bad thing to announce.
Yeah, not too hard with me, yeah.
Greg, you've been doing outdoor singing since the pandemic started on your Tenor Tuesdays. We've seen you featured on the news for this. You've also come and sung for us at the Opera from the Balcony series that NEMPAC has done in partnership with the restaurant Tresca. And now we're hearing about Sparrow Live, which I would love to just have you describe to us, because it's something brilliant. It's going to be a game changer in the field of Zoom performances and online performances in the time of COVID.
Yeah. So I guess I should give a little bit more about my background too. So I came into the art form late. Before that, I was in business for a while, and then I worked in arts administration last with the Boston Symphony Orchestra. And so I was a major gifts officer there. And so kind of having that experience, that background, and coming at full time into singing now, I had I had kind of a view of things from both sides. And one thing that I really noticed is when we talk about technology and we talk about kind of the use of it for democratizing what we do, or just for changing how we do things, at least in my opinion, the only employer that I once had that was slower in changing the way that we do things was the Roman Catholic Church. And there is a real opportunity for artists to be able to reach their audiences directly, with or without COVID, and to be able to democratize the way that we reach those audiences. COVID obviously put this plan for Sparrow Live into motion. So, what was it, March 12th? Actually, Heather and I had our final dress for BLO's Norma. Come to find out on March 13th that it was it March 11th or March? No, it was March 11th that we had the final dress. March 13th, come to find out that it was canceled.
That was the Friday. Yeah, that was Friday the 13th.
Yeah,
and our last performance was the Wednesday, which was the 11th for no one. Everyone was disinvited from the production, and everything hadn't been it hadn't officially been canceled, but I think many of us saw the writing on the wall at that point.
Yeah. And so, one of the big things for me, coming out of COVID was, well, you have all these artists who now have pretty much no way, or coming into COVID, I guess, have no way of really making an income or really reaching their audience right now. How can we use this idea that I had to democratize what we do now to get artists back to work? And that's where Sparrow Live kind of came to be. So realizing that I'm not a tech guru, I reached out to a contact of mine who's a founder in residence at Google, and he was the head of their startup ecosystems for a while. And he's now our technical advisor. And said, how do we get this done quickly? And he said, well, you can set up a website and you utilize unlisted YouTube lives. And I said, I don't want to do that because that's what everybody else is doing. And with Sparrow Live, we don't use Zoom, and there's a reason we don't use it. It's great for this kind of stuff because there's less lag than most. But to get that small lag, they compress everything down. So you have your audio quality isn't great. Your video quality isn't great in terms of what you can have. So we started with unlisted YouTube lives. We quickly moved off of that because it just wasn't sustainable. It was something to get out there quickly, but it wasn't sustainable to have, one of our paramounts is quality. So just kind of looking at this and thinking, well, one, we need to get back to work now. Two, even after the pandemic is over, or during the varying gradations of social distancing when we can get together. If you talk about those varying gradations, we might be able to get together with a quartet or even an ensemble or whatever it is, but we can't be in front of an audience. So how do we bring those audiences to us? How do we get ourselves into that space? And then the second thing is, if we're really talking about making our art form more accessible to all people that want to hear it, I know from my work in administration that there might be families of 5 who can't afford 5 $25 tickets, but might be able to afford one stream for the whole family. People like I have a 2-year-old, people like myself, my wife and I sometimes just can't go to performances because of the fact that we can't find a babysitter. If there are people who are immunocompromised, even after we're through with COVID, or people who aren't able to get to a performance. My daughter, obviously, I don't know if you've experienced this with Javi, but there's a lot more screen time happening now than there was on March 11th. That just has to do with the fact that she has 2 working parents, and we have to figure out something. And I said to myself, I want her to be able to watch something that is going to be enriching for her. So, obviously there are problematic themes in the storyline, and we can get in. Well, we don't need to get into that. I already realized that. But
it's a whole other panel.
Exactly.
To a
2-year-old, the magic flute is great, especially the Mets production of it with the puppets and everything else. And so I set her up with that. She was watching it. She's thrilled by it. A week later, she asked me to watch Tosca, which I'm like, I don't know. Probably not the best parenting move to have you watch this story, but whatever. You're just watching it for the music. So, the next one's probably going to be Wozzeck. But, she's somebody who's not, for good reason, at 2 years old, because of her attention span, not allowed into the theater, at least traditionally. And she's able to experience it from a young age. And, especially when the arts, I used to teach, the arts are being devalued in the schools. And how do we get them out there more effectively? We're actually talking with hospital systems about how do we get concerts to their patients who can't come. Even without COVID, there are patients that aren't able to go to a concert in the shared space of a hospital. And we all know the healing power that music has for people. So looking at all of that, we our main function is that we help stream high quality concerts. We're actually, Heather's going to be having a concert on Sparrow Live on Sunday night. Get your tickets. I will put I'll put the link to it in the chat, so you can all make sure that you have exactly what you need to get on there and buy a ticket. It's fantastic. I've heard some of her rehearsals, and you'd be lucky to see it. But we are really trying to make sure that everyone can have the experience of a live performance. And obviously, I'm not going to sit here and say that, if you're looking at the hierarchy of performance, there's being in the hall, there's watching a recording, and then there's being there for a live performance, which might be live streamed on your TV, because you still have that edge of a live performance. Is he going to hit the note? With me, who knows? I don't even know if I'm going to hit the note. So go ahead, Heather.
And if I can jump in, this is kind of backtracking a little bit, but I want to make sure that I mention it. I mean, I think it's just such a fantastic idea that you've started this particular type of thing. And speaking as a singer myself, I'm extremely uncomfortable with technology. I hate to see myself on camera. I hate to listen to myself. But all of those things, having to interact that way with an audience, has been really, really educational and extremely helpful for me in my singing. And I think that you and Sparrow Live, you do a fantastic job with making people feel comfortable and walking them through the technical aspect of that, because right away that would be intimidating for so many people, and you guys have really made it really easy to work with. And I think it's great, because obviously, when this first happened, we were all thinking like, oh, it's going to be a week or 2 weeks or whatever. And then when things kind of developed and we realized that this was going to be a long-term type of thing, it's like, quite honestly, the world is changing so much. And with things like, the rainforest being destroyed and humanity kind of going into that situation, finding some things that could be potentially dangerous, or even things like global warming. It's like, we have no idea what humanity is gonna come into contact with and is gonna come up against. And it's really nice that we're at this point now where, it's kind of a dress rehearsal. It's kind of like, this is in the worst possible case scenario, we've still created this structure where we can still do what it is that we need to do. Yeah. And I think it's great. So.
Well, and I think that even, like I was saying, there's kind of these varying levels of the hierarchy of everything. And when you look at it that way, I like to liken it to sports. So I don't know how many people here are baseball fans, but I'm a huge Red Sox fan. And in 2004, when David Ortiz hit the home run over the right field wall to beat the Yankees, send the series back to New York, or I guess that wasn't it, but to beat the Yankees in Game 4. I wasn't in the stadium. I wasn't in right field. I wasn't in the right field box, but I was at home and I tackled my father, and that's a memory that I'll have for my life. And I think that that's the same thing that we have the opportunity to do with the art that we create. You know, we had Anna Seda, who's a cellist in Boston, on a few weeks ago, and she played Britten's solo cello concerto No. 3 in memory of George Floyd. It was right after everything happened. And at the end of it, now I'm sitting there, you know, I'm glad that you find it easy, because, you know, when you're running this thing, you're sitting there thinking about all the technical aspects, everything that's going on. You're not just enjoying the performance. But even for me, I saw at the end of this, she came off and she's pulling up the bow, and there was this, you know, that communal exhalation that you have when you're sitting in a performance. At the end of it, there's that silence. You still get that. Now, you don't get that in the same way as it is when you're in the room with the performers and you can give the immediate feedback. And I'll be the first to admit that. However, if we're talking about it being accessible, then that's the way we do it. And when we talk about artists who aren't the Met, companies who aren't, you know, the Met, the BSO, and companies that are able to provide their own solutions for this, this is a way, when I talk about democratizing, that we can get out to new audiences. You know, the Met in HD series is still wildly successful. You know, when we rely on place-based performance, I know that personally, I have a lot of people that would come to my recitals if they could see a live stream of it, but they physically can't, because they might live in, I have a lot of family in Ireland, they can't come. You know, and that's another thing that I think as artists is a way that we're kind of hamstrung in terms of being able to get our artwork out there, our artistry out there. But then if we're being completely honest with each other, you know, realize the full value of what we do and the income of what we do. One of the biggest, you know, reasons that I really pursued Sparrow Live, I wasn't, when I got into this, I was not, when everything happened, I wasn't looking to start a startup tech platform. But one of the reasons I really got into it was because I saw a lot of artists going on Facebook Live, Instagram Live, or Zoom, YouTube, doing it for free. And I even realized that I might seem hypocritical, because I was one of them. And I realized that now I'm in this Tenor Tuesday thing, and I still do it. And luckily I'm in a position where we're okay financially. But, you know, we don't, in the classical performance space, all told, we don't train as long as we do, put in as much money into what we're doing as we do, to be reduced to virtual buskers.
I think that's the interesting point for me to hear for everyone involved, because I think that there's so little that's known about the life of independent contractors in that respect. I think that whether you're a musician, a dancer, a designer, an actor, any of those, that format where you really do rely on a gig-based profession, when you set up your schedule almost years in advance so that you know where you're traveling, so that you're not conflicting schedules and having to be in 2 different countries at the same time. Mm-hmm. All of that within an instant just changed. I remember my anniversary with my husband is March 14th, so it's Pi Day. So we had like dinner plans, and in between March 12th and the 14th, I went from approximately, you know, like if I was dividing my income up like a pie, 100% of what I was expecting to earn this year, down to about 15, 20, just within like a couple of emails being sent like, we're so sorry, we have to cancel. We're so sorry, we have to cancel. And not every contractor is in the same conditions with their employer. There is, for those watching who don't know, things called force majeure clauses, which mean that they're allowed to cancel a show and your contract, and that's it. There is no financial remuneration to be had.
Be glad they told you about it.
Yeah. And some companies in Boston very much did the opposite thing. I always want to give a shout out to the Metropolitan Chorale of Brookline, because I was one of 4 artists in residence and a couple of soloists hired, and we were in dress rehearsals for our second of 4 season concerts, and they knew that we might not even be able to have the dress rehearsal. So those who felt comfortable came, sang it, we recorded it, and then that was it for the season. And then they honored the contracts to potentially their own peril as a company, but I believe they're fine, to honor out the rest of our engagement. So pivoting that into what you're doing, which is bringing attention, Fran, to the fact that all of these people performing for free, it wasn't free getting to this point, and this is potentially an act of desperation, an act of, I need to buy my kids food and diapers, or things like that, like things that you didn't think you'd have to suddenly pivot and come into. How do we collectively as a group acknowledge what needs to potentially change in our industry? Where is the starting point for even returning to putting on a show together? I think that there's a lot of unknown variables of how do we keep our performers safe? How do we keep our audience safe? How do we guarantee that even when you contract out everyone that it's going to happen? Because now there's that element of almost post-traumatic stress of seeing it all crumble. So I love that just even amongst the 5 of us, I've heard everyone touch upon the empathetic part of it, which is that it really is a network of artists. It really is a network of creators that we have to acknowledge and amplify the voices of each other during this time. So I'm thrilled that we're all here, but I think that the best place to start is, before this all happened, what was everyone's original focus? Like, where were you when it hit? What happened? Brooke, jump in.
Final dress rehearsal. Yeah. So we had, this is Odyssey Opera at the Huntington Theater. We were pretty sure that we could go on. Our production meeting that was at, traditional 11 o'clock after the performers are all done and they're changed. And we were like, yep, we're gonna do this. And the next day, everything closed down. And like you, I got email after email after email. And I don't know about you, but the PTSD of every month that goes by, that on my calendar, I have 1 show opening a month that was booked. And every month that goes by, I'm just like, oh, that would have been Magic Flute in Aspen. That was going to be a great show. And speaking to what you mentioned about how do we go forward, how do we fund, I know a big problem is, a lot of the donor base for opera is elderly clients. I mean, any show that you look out there at that sea of white hair, this is a cultural problem in this country. Not so much, and I know, Lina, you could probably speak to this as well. One of my first opera gigs was with Peter Sellers, and touring the European opera circuit, they're all state funded. They are state employees with pensions and health care. It's amazing. Yes. And the audiences, because they're state funded, the audiences are younger because it's not $150 a ticket. And like Fran was saying, part of the reason why we're losing audiences is because not everybody can afford that. And I had a Zoom meeting with Commonwealth Shakespeare talking about their outreach program. And I've done, Boys and Girls Club with them and getting young inner city kids exposed to Shakespeare or theater of any kind, which is, really important in terms of how to communicate your emotions effectively. And one of the problems that came up was not only can you not afford the ticket to the theater, but there's no cultural awareness in terms of, oh yeah, my dad's an opera singer. Oh yeah, my aunt so-and-so is an opera singer. Because if it takes so much money to become an opera singer, you're not going to have people of limited economic means become opera singers. It's just not going to happen. And without outreach, without some paradigm shift to how do we fund theater and opera, besides elderly patrons that, you know, grew up with the culture of this is what you do. You have tickets to the ballet, you have tickets to the opera.
Well, and then if people like that are paying for the tickets, if that's what the opera perceives its kind of base to be, it kind of holds the art form back in a certain sense, because then you get like, you know, 1,000 productions of Traviata and Madama Butterfly, and you're not really telling the stories that are going to be relevant to that new audience. I actually have a question, and I mean, it's kind of related to opening the audience to other people, but it's also related to the performers in a sense. I think going back to what Fran said about wanting to democratize this whole aspect of performing, I thought it was really interesting because, you know, it's like you're a regional performer, you're kind of toiling away, you know, if you're lucky, a publication writes something positive about you that you can put on your website, but you're largely unknown, you know, because all of the real opera singers are singing at, you know, they're singing at the Met, or they're singing at San Francisco Opera, or they're in this program, or they're in that program. I mean, I think there are so many artists that kind of toil in this kind of this middle ground between you're professional, but you're not the professional. You're more than the collegiate. You know, you've done some professional jobs and things like that. And I kind of feel that with this whole movement towards keeping things local, when it comes to like produce and it comes to like, you know, meats and cheeses and buying from your neighbor and things like that, for some reason that concept hasn't really hit the arts industry in the same type of way. There's still this horrible kind of preconceived notion, if you're any good, you're going to be singing at the Met. And that was something interesting about this whole thing, because nobody's singing at the Met right now. It's like, what are the people at the Met doing? They've got to do what everybody else has to do. And I guess it's like, how do we change in creating this new audience, this potential new audience? How do we change this kind of preconceived notion that the good people are at the Met and I need not bother about anybody else is doing anything?
Mm-hmm.
Can I interject? No. So I am actually at this moment on my 8th episode of the Conductors Collective at the Dallas Opera. So I'm part of the TDO network. And in our meetings, we have realized that the demographic is shifting, because the people in the data who consumes these kinds of art are, for example, on Instagram or on Facebook, it's ages that are not 70 and up. So things are changing. It depends a lot on us on how to manipulate perceptions and use these opportunities in our advantage. I think we are, like, as Fran is doing and as you are doing your concert, it's about you creating the career for yourself. Nobody else can create a career for yourself. Nobody. It's not up to the managers. It's not up to anything to. You are the only one who can take ownership of your narrative and your self-image and whatever you have to say, and your voice is unique. So who cares if it's the Met or not?
Well,
really, guys, like, I think for me, I remember when I started my orchestra, Unitas, and this is something that I have always, maybe it's like out of my delirium of grandeur or something, that it comes with the package of the diploma of being a conductor. But every single gig was the most important gig that I have ever done in my entire life. All the time. That's how I always saw it. Like, for example, when we did the Vampire, I was like, and that's 6 years ago, I was posting that glove review over and over, and you see it and it's there, and people remember. it's one of those things. It's just, I think, of course, there are other, I think, of course, the mainstream and the competition is fierce, but I think if we have an opportunity to change the status quo, is now, because we don't have the access, the direct access to just tell anybody, oh no, yes, I just deserve to be here. That's why you have to come to my concert. You just have to like invent narrative.
I think you're
Fran,
absolutely right. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and that's something that I've been thinking about too. Is how do we take control over kind of how we reach our audiences, but then how we have that kind of empirical evidence to show out there that this is our value on the market. And you know, we are a very iterative process in terms of Sparrow Live. Now we grow and everything else, so we're also collaborative. But one thing that I've been hearing a lot is that artists also need some way to have a passive income stream. And so one thing that's in development with us right now, you know, obviously the first thing was getting concerts out there and getting people back to work. But what's in development with us is each artist is going to have a profile. And on that profile, you can put various performances from various periods of time. So say Unitas had a performance that you were particularly proud of, you can put it on there, and it might be a tipping system or a paywall. We're still trying to collaborate to hear what people think about that. But it's much like what you would see. I don't know how many people on here are gamers. I'm not. I've learned a lot about it. On Twitch, you know, you can still make an income from your past gameplay, and then you get a following as well. And that following is empirical evidence that when you go to the middlemen of our industry, the artistic directors, the whoever might be in the way, the gatekeepers, you can say, oh yes, but look at this following that I have on Sparrow Live, we'll say. You know, it's the same, if you want to go into pop, it's the same reason that Justin Bieber got famous, because he started doing covers on YouTube. And he gained a massive following on YouTube by just going out there and directly interfacing with his audience. And now whoever it was, I don't know, I think it was Usher, picked him up. And now he's huge. And why can't we use that same, not that same model, you know, I mean, my hair right now is getting a little Bieberish, but, you know, why can't we use that same model for our art form?
I have if I could interject for a second, I have a question and a comment in regards to that. I think one of the things that I think whenever anybody gets into the arts as a profession, I think people are thinking about, well, I love what I do and I'm, you know, committed to this and I can do it. And I know it's hard, but I'm going to do the work and I'm going to be great. And then one of the things that I realize as I get older is that there's so many like good singers around. And it's kind of like, you know, I think speaking to what you just spoke to, Fran, is it like it takes something to kind of cut through everything. It's like, what is going to be the thing that, you know, the thing that kind of gets you noticed? And it could just be you're in the right place at the right time and you know how to do what you know how to do, you know, and you're the, you know, the best that you can possibly be. You've done the training, you've done the studying, all the different types of thing. But I mean, it's like the shiny new object phenomenon. It's like you could have like 5 singers in a row that sound equally good, but then there's the one that you haven't seen before. It's like, oh, who's that person? I want that shiny thing, you know?
Yeah.
The other thing that I wanted to ask is, you mentioned money, and that made me think of like, you know, I mean, and Lina, you certainly have this with your own ensemble, but it's like creating a new thing oftentimes takes money. And you know, sometimes I think that our the industry of opera is kind of straitjacketed in a certain sense by the people who come to the opera, by the people on boards and the people who are donating the money, which oftentimes are very old and, you know, very wealthy type of people. And that sometimes, not all the time, but comes with a very specific kind of mindset of things that they want to see on the stage. And I think like with looking into the future and quite possibly experiencing some severe economic downturn that's a result from COVID, that's a result from other things that have been happening in our economy since the financial crash. It's like, what are alternative sources of funding? And how can we kind of lasso these figure out or create or use these alternative sources of funding, because I really think the game is changing in such a large way that we really can't take anything for granted anymore. It just kind of, sometimes it feels to me like it's the Wild West, that it's like, things are changing and they're going to continue to change. And how do we change with the world and not be beholden to kind of like the old systems that have kind of kept us frozen in our places?
I don't know. I think if I may interject, I think one thing that resonated with me about what Fran said is about the direct interaction with the audience. And if you talk about money, is the direct interaction with the customers. I think the advantages of the digital world of social media is that you have a constant feedback, like a constant marketing feedback of something that works and what doesn't, so that it's for you to figure it out how to adapt or pivot really, really fast. And I think that is one of the things that we never get to learn at school, because we're perfecting the aria, we're perfecting the downbeat, and nobody tells us that in the highest levels, first-tier orchestras, it's a business. I mean, they don't have the time. First of all, they're so big sometimes. All of these administrations are overworked and underpaid. Most of the time, the people that are on the middle tier, that are actually doing the work for us, scouting people and everything, that they need to go to the big managed houses, all of this. And it is perpetuating this cycle of the same people all over again, and then they feel it's capitalism. It's the biggest are the ones that get bigger. So the only thing that I at least have always thought in terms of my career is that I can only control what I do for myself. For example, and then I never have, with Unitas, I wanted, the first concert, I did a concert almost with 70 orchestra, and then I didn't have money to hire 70 people, because since the beginning, I always paid every single person. And I was at school, I was in college, and I paid every single person. And I was like, what is my core value? My core values is that I want to pay my musicians and I want to pay them union based. Okay. I may not have for a 30-piece orchestra, I have for a 5-people quartet, and I'm going to, but still, I think one of the secrets is that we cannot stop doing art just because we don't have the means to do the biggest thing that there is in the world.
Yep.
There's audiences for every single thing. There is someone who's dying to hear that aria that reminds them of their grandma. They don't have to go to a full opera. There is this kid that wants to know an instrument and they cannot do it. There's always art for everyone. So we just have to know what is our measurement of success, and from then build it. But we can only do what we can own ourselves.
Yeah, Lina, you're absolutely right.
That's an excellent comment.
Yeah, and one thing that I was thinking about while you were making your first comment, Heather, as well, which you touched on. Sorry, you're over here on my screen. But
and you're over there.
Oh, great. But anyways, one of the things that I think we can all speak to in this is how insidious the competitive atmosphere in this field can be. And you think about how much we've lost because of it, and how much we've lost of people singing what they want to sing, or playing what they want to play, or conducting what they want to conduct, and what they're good at conducting, what they're passionate about singing, and whatever it might be, because they want to fit into this model. But not everybody wants to consume what fits into that model. So that's why there's a hope behind, for me, my hope is that we can somehow get rid of this horrible sense of competition, because I like to think that I'm one of the more laid back ones, but I still walk into auditions, if I'm being completely honest with everybody. And if you say you don't ever have the thought, you're lying. You walk in audition, you're like, oh, I got to be better than them. I got to be better than them and them and them and them and them. And it puts undue pressure on us. It takes down the level of artistry we're able to perform, because we have so much on our minds, and we're not able to focus as much.
That's an excellent comment. That's an excellent comment. I mean, going back to what Lina said earlier about things that they don't teach you when you're at school. You're a student, and you're kind of opening your ears and opening your eyes and kind of like, fill me up with knowledge and tell me how this is really done. And you put a lot of faith in your professors to kind of be able to guide you stylistically to the right thing and kind of figure out what your voice is and all these different types of things. And that work kind of never stops, because whenever you work, you're just doing it on your own. But then there's a certain kind of level that kind of comes into it where it's kind of like, oh, well, who am I as an artist? And how does that connect with everything else? And sometimes when you're in this kind of competitive mindset of, I've got to sing better than this person, I know what you mean, because it takes the eye off the ball, in the certain sense that, it's really about none of those different types of things. It's about doing the stylistically thing that's right, checking all those boxes, but then feeling free enough in all of that you can bring what it is that you have to bring to the thing. And that's the hardest thing ever. And being on Zoom, but like having to record your, like, video recording myself, like in having to get used to looking a certain way and sounding a certain way, it has been really excellent, because I can look back on things and I can kind of say, oh, I really thought that was working out. Yeah, obviously not working out too well. Maybe if I do this, I can change it. And then it's like you make a change and you can perceive that change. And that's not something that I would have been able to experience any other way. But I know what you mean. It's an insidious thing that kind of works, and you kind of devalue yourself because you don't have this, or you don't have that, or you don't have that on, or you haven't performed here. And it's just like, right now everybody's in their living room doing this, and you might as well be the only person in the world, because I'm looking around myself. I don't see anybody else unless I look on the screen. Yeah. And if I sing something, well, nobody's applauding. So, I hope that I did a good job for myself. I mean, I think it's managed to refocus things in quite a positive way. I don't know if anybody agrees with that.
Heather, absolutely. I have to say, 30 years of doing fittings with actors, I have never not had an actor apologize for being the shape that they were. So you just gotta be who you are. Ballet dancers, not an ounce of fat on their bodies. They're like, oh, I'm so bloated, sorry. I'm gonna lose 10 pounds by opening night.
I promise. You're like, please don't, I'll have to change the costume.
Yeah, no, I'm like, just stay the way you are so I don't have to work anymore.
Imagine for a second, and I never say this, but I'm gonna say it here, talking about this anxiety to fit in a mold. Imagine a woman of color trying to get into a profession like mine, starting 10 years ago or 6 years ago. And I say it, and I remember a couple of weeks ago, they sent me this interview and they said, Lina, can you please tell me what is the most fun time that you've had while conducting? And I panicked because I could never find, like, in my memory, a time that I was happy. And I love this so much. I cannot imagine myself doing anything but that. Like, I feel absolutely whole, but I never having fun, not happy, but like having fun doing things. And this obsession of fitting takes away the joy. It really does. And at the same time, you reach an age, you reach a weight, you reach I don't know, whatever it is in somebody else's construct that you will never fit. I remember my first my first assistant conducting job in a really, really famous institution, that, you know, after getting all these accolades and getting mentored by amazing people, and we went on tour, and I just started noticing that they sat me in the back of the private plane and never with my mentor. And I'm like, okay, this is weird. The first day that I got into the hotel, I said, hey, I need like my hotel. I am Lina, and I'm here. And the guy said, oh, I thought you were the help. And I'm like, excuse me? It's like, oh, yes, I thought you were the help. And I'm like, no, I'm part of the staff. I'm one of the conductors. And you're telling me this in Mexico. And for me, this scarred me for life, because I said it didn't matter how much I tried, I was never gonna fit. And in that sense, in that moment, you know, like I cry, I did the whole thing. It's like, oh, you know, like I felt like a victim for like 10 minutes. And then I'm like, who cares if I don't fit? It's what makes me unique. Like it's what it's like. The age is that you have right now. It's the place that you are right now, that you're local. What makes you unique? It's not that how many times you were at the Met, because everybody can get at the Met. It's not how many mentors you have. It's just who you are. Everybody's interested in hearing Heather. Everybody's interested in hearing Fran, Lina, Alexandra, Brooke, Sarah, whoever it is. It's like embracing the uniqueness of our stories and learning how to tell them in a way that people can they don't necessarily need to connect by identifying themselves, but just by grabbing the attention is what is gonna make you unique. It's gonna make you a good artist. So who cares? Who cares if other people are competing? You can only compete with yourself, and you can only make yourself unique, and unique in your voice. I mean, you cannot have other people's voice. So why bother?
Lina, I think that you touched on something that I was hoping we could circle back to, and I think right now is a wonderful moment. 2 weeks ago, we did have a large discussion on diversity in the arts and how it impacts different fields of the arts, how it impacts the dance world and the choral conducting world and the orchestral world and beyond. And I think one of the things I've been seeing a lot recently, especially on Instagram, because I think that there's a higher ability for anonymity for those who need it, is the deconstruction of the arts and things that were tolerated before that are no longer going to be tolerated, but also an intense investment of interest into art that hasn't been able to be championed because there was so much competition. When everybody's making noise and no one's going to each other's shows, it's really hard to, you know, feel like you're creating. And now that there's enough silence, I've been loving this creation of Latinos in Opera is an Instagram handle that I love following, because it's just all these wonderful singers that might not be able to have their foot in the door otherwise, just because there is this hierarchy within the opera world of even just singing in Spanish. It's just not, it hasn't been treated historically with the same respect and gravitas as when we first started getting trained on Italian and French. And so one of the things that I love about your work with Unitas in Boston is the fact that for me as a music educator, we're never going to have an audience if we don't teach people how to listen at a younger age. And how do we expect the Latinx community to feel represented when they don't get to hear their own music performed on a larger scale? So I'd love, I put the URL for your ensemble in the chat box. I'd love, while the rest of our audience is pondering if they're going to ask a question in the chat box, and feel free to type that now, if you could let us know a little bit about the grant you just received and about the work that your ensemble does, because you know, but for those who don't, I'm Puerto Rican, and in my household, we weren't allowed to speak Spanish outside of the house. We didn't do it. My siblings were all born on the island. I was born in Maine, and it was very like, hey, we're here now, we're white. And it was very much a taught lesson. So it's interesting getting to live in a time where I get to see my heroes and my friends champion the work from Central and South America. So I'd love to hear what you're up to next with Unitas.
Well, I just actually it comes as a weird time, because when I was doing the my planning, I actually didn't. I sometimes I struggle a lot with the fundraising, especially when I'm not at home, because at this moment my career was taking me to other places, and I think in like during COVID, like before COVID, I didn't spend in Boston more than 3 Sundays or 4 Sundays to say hello to my dog and my husband, and it's weird, but it's impossible to fundraise. So I have been always on the train thought that it doesn't matter if I have a little money. With that little money, I'm going to put a concert with like at least a quintet, and I don't have to conduct. It's not about me conducting, but at least celebrating the art of Latin American culture. So with the Arts Boston, I actually applied for a concert called Reimagined, which is that a lot of music that is symphonic, I actually already reduced it before COVID. I was just, I don't know, it's like, it was prophetic. I was it's the centenary of Piazzolla's birth. So I did a lot of arrangements of tango, and it's like a storytelling of the history of tango in different instances. And I'm going to do like actually a bolero night. And I did my arrangements with bolero for tenor, and it's just a way to create these two really popular music genres within the Latinx extreme, and bring them to the world of classical music, because this has been such an incredible learning experience. As you say, when you immigrated here, you were like, okay, you're white, and this is how it is. There are a lot of, I don't want to say racial confusion, but identity, like identity fluidity within the Latinx community. Mm-hmm. And some of them just feel outcast, some of them not. And it's not only about race, but it's also about class, and a lot of there's so many complicated layers and the dynamics, and then you add the diaspora and this experience. So it's in a lot of ways it's really difficult to identify the right amount of audience, or not the right type of audience that I want to my concerts. So at the beginning that I started my concerts, I wanted to bring highly contemporary music, because that's what I like, and like Latino, these like really out there music, and yeah, I mean, fill the audiences, but it didn't enrich the community. And my orchestra, it is community oriented, artistically it's excellent and everything, and all the musicians are good, but my main objective is to bring Latin art to everyone who has not met it, even if it's like Anglo-Saxon person, it doesn't matter. Like, but for that sense, I really need to build the bridge, instead of like build a wall where we cannot enter each other. It's really building the bridge between two, exactly, between two cultures. So that's why I chose bolero, because it's like so popular, and those have been like the popular but like really well arranged music, or something reduced, has worked really well for the community of Boston. So that's what I am doing right now. And we do have always bilingual Christmas pops, which is, so you go, for example, and you sing Silent Night, and you hear Noche de Paz, and you hear it in Portuguese, because everybody's singing in every language, and everybody's like crazy, and it's a cacophony, but it doesn't matter. It's because everybody's singing the same in 5 languages, and everybody's feeling that they belong to each other within one song, or like not the drummer boy, because we have an arrangement, and then we mix it with traditional music. So that is where I find my joy. Talking about things that at the beginning I was like, oh, how do I find my joy? Those in Unitas is where I find it, and I'm happy to be able to have at least the resources for this grant to do it, because sometimes it's really hard to put this into words for the grants here in Boston and for them to understand that Latin music matters and Latinos are also part of the community and people of color are part of the community and we want to consume the art. We really do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we cannot be only like the underserved because no, it's like you cannot be only underserved because you have never received it.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't say anything. I remember when I was studying. Yeah, I remember when I was studying here at NEC, and that's when I found it. It's like there is no, like in a city where there's like the most amount of nonprofits in the arts, there's not a Latinx orchestra. How is this possible? You know, like, and it's one of the biggest minorities in the city.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I was like, okay, maybe this is something that I can do and I can actually love the repertoire and I know it like back to front. So that's what I'm up to, and I'm so happy that I have the time to actually go local again. It really makes me super happy.
That's so exciting. We don't have any questions in our chat box for everyone, but I do have a question for everyone. So I'm going to be selfish and take the audience Q&A moment from them. How do we focus on our craft right now? In each of your respective areas, I'd love to hear one thought or message of hope for our designers who will be watching this, for our musicians who will be watching this. How do we use this time to make a better version of what it will be when we are healthily able to be amongst each other? And I don't want to say return to like it was before, because I'm of the mindset that didn't work. So Brooke, I want to pass it to you.
Sorry, I was just like chomping at the bit there.
Oh, go here.
Before I answer your question, I had a thought for Fran for monetizing. So in the film industry, we changed from residuals. You know, we all get a little kickback every time our film was shown at a film theater, and then it changed to when it was filmed. You know, you get a different kickback when it's on TV. And now there's a new algorithm for when people are streaming because, right. So could you use that algorithm for residuals for your concerts?
That's a good thought that I would need to look into before I can say yes or no. But yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting way of thinking about it.
So a person that you would want to talk to look at that would be like a SAG-AFTRA union representative who's in charge of those residuals going to the actors. Because, you know, every time you watch their content, they get a kickback. Yeah. And it should be the same for music, and it's just not. Yeah.
Well, and I think that, you know, that's kind of, if you look at popular music and kind of what happened. And so one of the, I would be driving down to New York before this happened twice a week for lessons. And I would listen to a lot of organizational psychology books because I'm a nerd. And one of the big things that you would hear is, you know, not only is it kind of about how we value ourselves, but how we have that equal exchange of value between both parties. And right now it's that kind of power structure. And I think the residuals is one way probably where we could at least look into it. I don't know how exactly it would work in our thing, but you know, when we talk about our what we do at Sparrow, there's no upfront costs to host a concert. There are extras that just because of the work that we have to put in to put them up, that, you know, there's whatever, but the artist gets 90% of the net revenue from their concert. And that's industry leading of any service, any platform, but we're the only one that really is super accessible to any artist. You know, that's kind of the mission. Everything we do goes back to our mission of democratizing what we do and making sure that underrepresented voices have that representation. And even as we look at the current moment in time we're at right now, it's one of the biggest questions that we're asking ourselves, and if anybody, if you in the chat box, if you guys do, if you want to talk about it offline, I'd be happy to. But how do we create something that will make sure that we are a resource for underrepresented voices, underrepresented composers, conductors, ensembles, whatever it might be? How do we break the mold? Because you look at popular music, and they had their opportunity when Napster came out and everything else, and Apple Music came out, or iTunes at that point, and they didn't jump on it. The music industry could have, Columbia could have, Columbia Records, that is, could have started their own streaming service that would have had fair remuneration versus a fraction of a cent per play. So how do we take this inflection point to change it? I think you're right.
I think theater and music are on different timelines in terms of their unions, because theater had a union right off the bat. I mean, New York unions started very early on, so that's probably why, because the unions were the ones that pushed for the residual scale once we moved to streaming and non-television quantifiable, because a TV corporation buys it from the film corporation. It's totally quantifiable. But I think that's the key, is that the unions were not there for the artists of musicians.
I just want to pop in and remind everyone that we do end at 7, but I'm open to staying a little bit longer. For those who need to go, I know Lina needs to leave right now. But thank you so much, Lina, for joining us. For those who wish to stay on a couple minutes longer, just to hear a couple of wrap-up thoughts from Fran and from Brooke, please do. Thank you, Lina. Please check out Lina's work with the Conductors Collective and with the Unitas Ensemble. The links are in the chat box. Thank you, Lina.
Thank you so much for having me, and I miss you all, and thank you, Fran. I hope to see your work and talk about it.
Oh, thanks.
Miss you too, Lina. Keep posting pictures of me.
Oh, of course. Bye. See you. Sorry.
I apologize, and just to say that I actually have to leave as well right now, which is so rude of me to just walk out right now when people are still talking.
I want to hear some thoughts, and then but thank you, Heather.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Brooke. Thank you, Fran.
Thank
talk to you later, Alex.
I was just gonna follow up and actually answer your question, Alex, and say that, Fran, like you, I'm a nerd as well, and what I'm listening to while I'm sewing is medieval and Renaissance history, because that was my minor.
My surprise face, Brooke.
Right? So what's fascinating to me, though, is the parallels, because the bubonic plague wiped out a third of Europe. We all read in our history books, but what they don't mention is that it also wiped out populations in Persia, India, China, and Africa. And what came about because of that was the Renaissance. So there's my hopeful, we may be out of work for a year until there's a vaccine, but the hope is that there'll be a Renaissance after this, because people will have time to percolate and reassess and focus themselves.
I couldn't love hearing that more. I've been watching a 24 lecture series on Prime on the bubonic plague, so I feel like maybe we're on the same wavelength from afar. But I think that one of the most beautiful things to recall is that this isn't the first time that our kind have been asked to pivot and to reimagine what the future can be. And I think that even just in hearing, Brooke, about your work with not only with masks, but just like how you imagine, even like as far back in Lucasfilm as like, you're like, these furry costumes are great. What if we could just do this on computers? Like in that kind of moment, is that it's never enough to me as an artist for the status quo to just remain. It's always about reframing what's come before and about imagining and focusing on what hasn't been said yet. And so I love that notion that we may have at some point very soon a grabbed by the people Renaissance within the world of the arts. And as a music educator and hearing about budgets getting slashed left and right, I'm like, I have fought too hard since I got that first undergrad, defense statement written to see that happen again in my lifetime.
Yeah.
Fran, what about you? A couple of words of hope before we go.
I think that if there's one thing that we've seen, it's that artists are resourceful. I mean, everyone has. If there's one thing that I have just experienced, I guess, in talking to people about Sparrow Live and getting their thoughts and getting their opinions, is that everybody deals with these situations in different ways, and none of those is wrong. None of it is incorrect. We all deal how we deal. But I think that we have the ability, exactly like Brooke was just saying, to really change things, shake up things, and really make a difference for how we reach our audiences, how we are able to be accessible, and I do think, and I hope that we are going to come out of this stronger as an art form, because we're going to have more voices involved in it.
Beautiful.
There you go.
I love it. I can't wait to see Heather's concert on Sparrow Live. I look forward to seeing your second baby in action. Your first one turned out like perfect, so I think that
I think she's pretty great. Yeah,
I think she's pretty great. She's pretty great. And I just want to thank both of you so much for just spending this time with us for our third episode of Ask an Expert. This will be placed on our nempacboston.org website for those who wish to return to it for footage or for reminders and reviewing purposes. Our next episode will not be for 3 weeks, and we will be coming in focusing on the topic of casting. It'll be a director's discussion at the table, and how do we cast